He's so tall.
Intro part 1, crowd work. Anybody in here in love? Anybody ever been in love? Me too, but not with a human. I'm a geek, so I'm in love. I'm in love with a book, but it's really hard to categorize this book. It's sui generis, without gender or genre. Let's just call it a. What the crap is that of awesome? Intro part 2. This is a story, but I'm a meta geek. So it's a story about a story. It involves stories about stories that themselves are about stories. Intro part 3. All the pieces matter, said a guy on the wire one time. Chapter 1. I've always been a geek. In high school I played tennis, but I stopped when my coach made us do this thing called running. And I started getting involved with this activity called Model UN. And I don't know if you know this, but on like the scale of activities, high school activities that make you attractive to women or girls, high school girls, Model UN is like slightly above the Magic the Gathering Tournament of Champions. Just behind the Pokemon Fan Fiction Writers Association. So that did help. Alright, so let me back up a little bit more. When I was younger, I read this book, and it was one of my first experiences. It was called The Giver. And it was one of my first experiences where I was like, this is awesome, but I have no idea what's going on. Kind of like my first several / every sexual experience. And so I went back to it years later and I found out that largely it's a story about the importance of storytelling and of stories. Chapter 2. My first year in the real world after college. I have to work for 9 hours consecutively, and 2-hour naps are not, an acceptable thing to do in the middle of the day. And I'm a geek, so the thing that I miss most about college is getting to read all the time. And there's this one book that I've been eyeing up, kind of like that girl who you know is too attractive for you, too intelligent. She showers regularly. So I've just been kind of creepily looking at her. And then one day I decided, I'm going to try this book. And that book was called Infinite Jest. And it was love at first meta. And oh, was it meta. It was a form of entertainment about entertainment in America that involved a key piece of entertainment that was supposed to be fatal to you if you watched it. It involved a game with tennis. And this game where you played tennis, you were also trying to dominate the world. It was kind of like a risk / tennis game that didn't involve running. I was like, oh my goodness, my heart started, like, this book is awesome. And so, I read this book, and this book was beautiful, it was hilarious, it was funny, it had footnotes, and it had footnotes about footnotes, which I thought was just awesome. Outro. Part 1. This book has lines in it that I felt like I've said to myself 1,000 times, but didn't have the words for until I read them. Like, we all know we're all lonely for something we don't know we're lonely for. How else to explain this curious feeling that goes around, like missing someone you've never even met? And I found Infinite Jest was what I've always been lonely for. And David Foster Wallace said in the last book of fiction he ever published, this beautiful line. He says, every love story is a ghost story. And so every story I ever tell, any story I ever tell or ever write, will be yet to be written love letter to the guy, David Foster Wallace, who will forever haunt me. Thank you.